speaking of EVP, can you break it down for me? What does it mean?
So in simple terms, it's the deal you get back when you work somewhere. So as a candidate, you give your effort, your skills, your resources, but what do you get back in return? And different companies have different perspectives on EVP. Some will focus on salaries, some on career progression, some on community, but there has to be some golden thread or USP which makes your company stand out, be recognizable, and something team members can connect to.
Hello and welcome to the Plum Pod, where we talk about all things HR and mental health. I'm your host, Georgia, and founder of Access HR. On today's episode, I'm joined by David Hughes, Global Head of Talent at Costa Coffee, as we discuss the power of authentic community building and its role in shaping a strong employee value proposition. And if you're looking to transform your EVP into more than just words, then this is definitely the episode for you, as he shares practical examples to get you started. David, hi.
Hello.
Welcome to today's episode, and thank you for joining me on the podcast.
It's great to be here.
So for any of our listeners who don't know who you are, I really want to set the scene because they need to know a lot about you and your background. It's very inspiring. So I have one question that I ask every single guest who comes onto the pod. And the question is, was HR part of the plan, or did this happen by chance?
And I imagine like most of your guests, HR's never part of the plan.
Nope.
It's something you stumble across and fall in love with.
Everybody has said that so far. I'd never know if you're going to surprise me, though.
No, definitely not. So my background is actually in sport before HR. So following university, I was actually a professional athlete for the 10 years that followed that. So I was part of the Great Britain team. So very much non-HR related, and a very different walk of life to what I ended up in now.
And what was your sport of choice?
So I did athletics. I started off in the junior GB team in the 110 hurdles, and progressed pretty rapidly to the senior team, and then moved up to the 400 hurdles, where I was lucky to travel the world, run some major championships, meet some amazing people, and loved the first 10 years of my adult career, if you will.
I love that. I also find that when you've been a part of sport, it really shapes you as a leader. I don't know if you found that with your sporting career to how you are now in leadership.
Yes, definitely. I think when you start your adulthood in a certain sector or function or sport, it kind of shapes who you are as a person, which obviously rolls over into who you are in the workplace. I think with sport, people naturally go to, did that make you task-orientated, resilient, results-driven? And to an extent, of course it did, especially in athletics, where you're judged on your centimeters and milliseconds. But I think the biggest learn for me, and I get back to my prior point, was that I was so lucky at a young age to travel the world. I went to all the continents, I met some amazing people, and it shapes your kind of cultural awareness and people and different diversities and backgrounds. And I love that about sports, competing against them, training with them, being coached by them. I think that's how I fell into the people world a little bit and probably accelerated my career because I had a love for people.
And talk to me about how you went from being in sport and traveling around to then being where you are, which is global, but in a very senior position. Talk to me about that transition.
So it was an interesting transition. So after kind of 10 years as an athlete, so I'd be maybe 28 by this point, I was really proud of what I achieved on the track, in Commonwealth Games, in European Championships, and many medals that went with it. I was kind of proud of myself. It takes a lot to say that, I think, being your own biggest critic. But I always knew I wanted to do something different and have a life after that. So I chose to retire relatively early. And as part of kind of life as an athlete, I had done a gap year, if you will, at Adidas head office.
Oh, nice.
And I loved it there. I worked in marketing, and I really thought that was my future. It was sport, it was marketing, it was people. It just suited me. I remember after athletics, I went to meet a recruitment agency on the premise of, can you help me get back into that type of work? It's definitely my future. And they said, yeah, sure. Just come and work for us for a little bit while you figure it out, and we'll help you. I thought, no harm in that, is there? 1 month led to 1 year, led to 3 years, and I did 3 years with the Michael Page Group. And actually, I enjoyed it to an extent. It suited some of what I was looking for. It was a great training ground, credit to the Page Group. It's a phenomenal training to learn a bit more about HR and talent acquisition. But soon after that, I knew I wanted to do something different and really into the corporate world and start on the ladder. So I moved across to Boots.
And when you were at Boots, did you go more into the HR space or the talent acquisition space?
So I started off in talent acquisition, and it was a broad role which covered attraction, assessment, employer brand. It was employer brand and EVP, something I naturally gravitated towards, where my passions, my interests instantly went to. I think the talent acquisition side, in Boots, you had volume, you had global support center. The operational side of it, you can quickly master, but it's the attraction, the assessment, the stakeholder management, being out in the business.
Yeah.
Was super exciting. That's where I wanted to spend my career, really.
Amazing. And the fact that you, from 18, traveling the world in sport to now where you are in your career, I think is a real testament as well, but also the skills that you've learned along the way. For today's episode, we're really going to focus on community. And I know that you and I, when we were talking before this episode, it's something that we both are really passionate about, and you've got a lot of knowledge and experience. We're definitely going to tap into that today. And it's actually really timely because this week is Mental Health Awareness Week in the time when we're recording this episode. And the theme for this week and this year is community, which is perfect. And I think it's a really good time for us to bring these conversations to people's ears, because it's not... The future of work has changed, especially post-COVID. And I know we'll definitely get into that. And it's all about strong connections. We're not feeling alone anymore. And I would love to start by understanding from your perspective, what does community mean to you?
So I think it's the connection a brand has with its team members and the communities it serves. So it's the concept of giving back and making a difference. And that's so meaningful to people now, whether you work for a brand or you're a consumer of the brand, to what extent you give back. It's critical in one's career choices, consumer habits, etc.
Have you noticed a difference with community in terms of how we see that in the workplace as well with our external brands?
So, really simple answer, actually, it's engagement and it's retention. So we've looked internally at Costa and externally across the industry, to what extent does community impact team members, or is it a community strategy or sense of purpose? And the statistics are staggering, and it's proof of why companies should take this seriously. So in Costa, the two bits that stood out to us was a sense of connection, togetherness, and engagement is at its highest when there's a clear community agenda. That could be at a store level, it could be at a function level, even in a global location. In addition to that, I need to recall the exact statistics. Turnover is significantly reduced when there's a sense of purpose and a sense of community within a brand. So along with looking at Costa internally, we have looked across the industry at latest trends and statistics, and we found that turnover is reduced by up to 50% when there's a sense of community in a particular store or function, which is a massive, massive number, that. And I do think HR or brands can do a lot more to drive the agenda here.
That's actually quite eye-opening. Like when you said that, the words wow came into my head, because I think a lot of people are going towards other benefits within an organization. They're thinking about like perks and all these great tangible things you can put in place. People are overlooking community, and you've just shown there how much value we can bring to an organization for people personally and professionally by having that internal sense of community, but also external.
Well, if you think of two things to mention here. So a candidate's motivation for joining or maintaining a role in a business, the salary, career progression, those will be at the top. But if you look at where community and sustainability, etc., sat, it was nowhere to be seen 10 years ago, not even on the radar. And it is rocketing up there, and it will keep going up. And from a consumer perspective, people chose the jeans they bought, the house they bought, the car they bought based on a brand's green credentials or sustainability credentials. Now, their careers are being carved out by what a brand stands for. That's only going to increase over the coming years. So I guess the action is take it seriously now. It's only going to accelerate.
And what do you think's influenced that rise from being more bottom on the list for community and sustainability? What has triggered that rise closer to the top?
Well, the quickest answer is demographics. The Gen Z population, they care more than anyone about the future planet. So statistically, the Gen Zs are saying, I want to work for a brand that gives back. We haven't seen the same in the older generations.
And how can HR, because I completely agree, I do think Gen Z are having an incredible influence on our future of work, but how can HR professionals start to lean into that more for the conversation around community and sustainability?
So I think it's not overly common that the community or charity sector sits within HR. Historically, it could sit within supply chain or marketing or its own little function. And what I've observed in my experience is it's often an afterthought or a bit on the side. If it's given a sense of purpose and priority, the impact is massive. And we've seen at Costa in particular, teams rallying behind the agenda and taking pride in it as well. They want to make a difference on behalf of Costa. That's driving the engagement and then the concerted effort they put back into their jobs. It's huge.
And do you think it's helped that Costa's bigger vision and mission is something that the team do really take pride in? So they're bought into it a lot more.
Well, I think so. We have two things at Costa. One is our local community initiatives, what we do at a store level, our community grants program, volunteering policies. And there's a lot of followership for that because it means something locally.
Yeah.
We also have our Costa Foundation, which is common in many brands. They have their foundations, their charities. And this is how we help children in coffee growing communities have a better start in life. And people in our stores, they can connect to that as well. The supply chain of the coffee, we're giving back. So again, they can see where, as Costa grows as a business and grows globally, top of mind for us is giving a bit back, which is so important.
You just said connection then. And I loved it. I made a note of it because I think that's really missing in a lot of organizations. There's no intentional connection and there's not a lot of communicating that connection to the wider team. You said then that community hasn't always fallen within the HR space. There's another piece, which is comms. I think comms hasn't always fallen with us, whereas now it is within the people sphere. We are managing comms. And I'm just thinking for anyone who is listening and they're thinking, okay, we don't have a foundation or anything like that, but how can we start to build that connection, strong connection for community? How can we start to do that if we don't have a foundation?
Start small and find something purposeful. I'll give you a great example of this. So whilst we have our big community programs and we have our foundation, last year we did something a little bit different, and this is where other brands can get involved very quickly. So we partnered with a school called 5 Acre Wood. It's one of the largest SEN schools in the UK. Again, statistically, those that leave an SEN school and go into paid work, it's as though it's 3 or 4%, which is quite heart-wrenching actually. And we felt there was something we could do to support that at a very local, easy to access level, which other brands could quite easily do. And we helped them convert a train carriage into a cafe. It's an amazing story, actually. And what it was able to do is children that really struggled in the classroom to do maths or English or to get an education, we took them to the cafe. They could learn skills, how to be a waitress, how to pot wash, how to be a barista and make coffee. They can then go into the workplace with a skill rather than education. And all it took was a bit of initiative from the principal of 5 Acre Wood, who's amazing, to partner with Costa and a couple of other brands to make this dream a reality. But again, that's at a much more local level and easily achievable if there's intention and purpose behind it and a real sense of care to the community.
And what impact did you see from doing that?
So we went to visit the school recently, and And we met some of the children, and they do pull on the heartstrings a little bit because they feel that they're cared for more than maybe the education system allows them. And you can see them in the cafe making coffees, learning to be waitresses and waiters. And I think that what I heard from one of them was a sense of pride. I feel like I've got a skill now I've never had before, and I've been able to move from a classroom environment I really struggled with to a skill. And then a CV, I can go into the workplace as a, and search for paid work, which I never had the option to do. And again, it builds a sense of care and pride, which our team members now can see what impact we're making. And it builds their retention, their engagement as well.
That's honestly incredible and such a great example of potentially we don't have the available resources of a foundation. However, there's always small things that we can do that can create a huge impact. And when you were talking then, I was thinking about the internal team and the engagement that they will have felt from seeing those children develop on those skills. And we were talking earlier, actually, before we started recording, around hiring for skills. And I think that's a really good example then, because that is the future of work. The education system and the school environment isn't for everybody, but if we can start to prioritize on our skill building, we're setting people up for success.
And I think we will see more of that. So less on the formal routes and qualifications and more into skills and experiences, which you can learn on interns and apprenticeships, etc., which just gives more accessibility and availability to the masses. So it's great. We're heading this direction.
For where you are now, with your head of talent role global, can you tell me a bit more about the pillars within that? I think it'll be really inspiring for our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So I now look after a broad COE role for Costa, working directly for our Chief People Officer. So I look after talent acquisition, which is everything from a barista in our store right up to our executives. In addition to that, I look after talent management and diversity and inclusion, which I actually believe go very, very nicely together as we build an inclusive environment, and community and charity. So a really broad spectrum COE, but it all knits together perfectly when you think of attraction, development, and assessment.
I actually haven't heard of such a nice thread between them all before. And have you found that when you first went into the role, they were all there already as pillars, or have you kind of added on different segments as the organization has grown with priorities?
No, we've absolutely added it on. And we bolted on additional functions where appropriate, because talent acquisition should always be sat with talent, in my opinion. Diversity and inclusion is a thread that runs through all of that to make sure we are being inclusive and thoughtful and accessible at all occasions. The community and charity piece, that was an addition we brought in there because we wanted to really bolster our employee value proposition. The deal you get with working for Costa. So what do we give back? And again, the narrative connects so nicely there.
Speaking of EVP, can you break it down for me? What does it mean?
So in simple terms, it's the deal you get back when you work somewhere. So as a candidate, you give your effort, your skills, your resources, but what do you get back in return? And different companies have different perspectives on EVP. Some will focus on salaries, some on career progression, some on community, but there has to be some golden thread or USP which makes your company stand out, be recognizable, and something team members can connect to and they want to work there.
And how do you ensure that the deal that you were talking about is actually in reality when they get there? I think sometimes companies can position a certain package, and then when they get into employment, potentially it's not there. Because there's a question I love to ask with every onboarding that I do, and that's, was there anything that we didn't offer you that you've not received so far? How do you ensure that you've got that thread?
Well, I think it's a company's biggest pitfall is they put all their emphasis on employer brand, which is your shop window, and they over-egg it.
Yeah.
Look at us, come work for us. And people join and they go, this wasn't what I signed up to, promise me. And they leave. And that causes more problems than just hiring the right people in the first place. So employer brand is, the shop window, which should articulate your EVP. But do the EVP work first. And my biggest advice on this is be authentic, don't be a marketeer. There's no benefit to going, we focus on this, we do this. If you don't An EVP is authentic, simple as that. Interesting, there's a great connection back to community here and team member sentiment towards a brand, and it's dropping off a cliff. I think it's like an 18% reduction in team member sentiment. So what this means is companies are writing all these sustainability credentials, net zeros and green deals, and they're not living up to it. So team members, it's whitewashing. Team members, rather than being neutral and say nothing, they're saying we want to be great over here and doing nothing about it.
Mm-hmm.
Engagement is plummeting versus saying nothing in the first place. And this is where people are getting too excited with employee brand and marketeering versus authenticity. And authenticity should be a value that runs through everything.
I've definitely seen this as well, where a lot of companies are striving for big statuses to show, look great on the outside and super shiny. But then the reality is on the inside, they're not potentially living up to that. And I'm really glad actually that you mentioned around a plummetation in engagement, because also as an employee, you feel a little bit hard done by, and that potentially the truth hasn't been told to you because you are so passionate and purpose-led that you want to be up here with all the credentials.
Interestingly, we've done some listening on this, but I think it's more of an industry-wide thing, so I'll talk generally, is some of the big statements out there at the minute, net zero, for example, is not having the cut through with team members you maybe think it does, because the response we're getting back is, well, it's legislation, you have to do it, everybody's doing it. It's the localized work with the foundations, with the local communities, which drives emotion and sense of purpose. So actually some of the bigger ticket items, which you assume will have, pull effect with candidates, it doesn't, because that's just seen as a hygiene factor, but they have to do, or legislation is pushing you there. But the companies that take the additional step and do things that are probably a bit more under radar with local communities, with SEN schools, with foundations, that's how team members get excited and want to stay with the business.
Have you noticed a difference with Gen Z out of interest? In terms of, you can't pull a wool over Gen Z's eyes. The internet is available, it's accessible. They know if something is required by law that you're saying is a really shiny object thing to have. I just didn't know if you're having or you're noticing a difference with Gen Z in terms of their connection.
So good question. We didn't want to stereotype the Gen Zs on this one. So we asked them.
Yeah.
From a consumer lens, and we paneled 500 Gen Zs and said, just tell us more about your sentiment towards brands more holistically when it comes to sustainability, communities and charities. And it was staggering feedback. You can't put the wool over their eyes. They do know what's going on in the world and they're digitally available to them. And they talked about authenticity. They talked about impact and data, and they do their research. And gone are the days where people buy, again, cars or jeans because of sustainability credentials. They care about consumables now. So, a can of orange or a coffee, what connection does that have back to a community or sustainability agenda? They genuinely care. So I think give Gen Zs the credit they deserve. They do their research and they choose brands with a sense of purpose.
I also think that's really powerful though and inspiring to everybody, because we should be doing that. Like that's the kind of life that I want to live. I want to know the sustainable side of an organization, what impact they're having in my choices. And that all comes down to the authenticity and transparency that brand is happening. A lot of people now are chasing big shiny brands, especially when we're looking for our next work environment. But also a big thing is a brand that has purpose, that brings belonging, connection, and community. I desperately notice a difference post-COVID with that as well.
And I think this is a general statement, but I've done plenty of listening across the industry and at talks. Brand loyalty is at risk of plummeting unless there's a bit more of an emotional connection. So candidates or team members, they are becoming more savvy and actually a bit more selfish. So, they don't just want to go to work anymore for their salary or a great line manager or development. They want to know, but what else are you as a company doing? Versus what I just get back as an individual. So you have to live up to that or your competitors will do it for you.
And what's the cost for if we don't do that?
I think I come back to the prior points of engagement and turnover. If you want team members to be truly excited by a brand, to give concerted effort, to give an amazing customer experience. Just show them you have a sense of purpose.
I think as well, for any founder, entrepreneur who's listening, this may not have been a priority for them until they've realized how important it is. And I do think if you look at any data and research from employee feedback recently, this is a really common thread. So this is nothing new, but we're not using the data that is readily available to us. And that's what will be the difference between an organization that is here within 10 years' time and those that aren't. Because you've got to shift. And there's been such a huge shift and priorities are changing. We've got Generation Alpha, who will also be in the workplace soon. And I'm really excited for them to come in so that we can start to change as an organization. But I think with where we're going now, any organization who is listening and doesn't prioritize their EVP and building community internally and externally, I think they're doing themselves a disservice.
They are. And they should see this as an opportunity rather than a risk. And I have to be humble in saying I didn't have a great depth of knowledge in community and charity, 2-3 years ago. And I've learned much more about it in the industry and obviously at Costa. But I felt firsthand the impact it has. I think what's important as well is the person leading a function has to care about it. If they see this as a KPI or a target or it's been done to them, the brand will notice that. So I have to be so passionate about our Costa Foundation, about our community agenda, and I can help instill that across our 20,000 team members.
What helped you the most to learn? You said 2-3 years ago it wasn't on your agenda, but what helped you to learn?
It's a quick answer, actually, is a trip to Colombia. So as part of our Costa Foundation, I went to Colombia. We do procure coffee from there. And it's one of the first markets we started building schools in. So the coffee farming industry out there, it is a bit in poverty. The coffee farmers work hard, often they're family driven. And the communities out there, they are a little bit broken and poverty struck in places. So what the foundation has done is gone to them communities, found an opportunity to work with local governments and help build schools and libraries and access to education. So going out there firsthand and looking at the schools that Costa Foundation have built was the most humbling experience I've ever witnessed, in my life, and the impact it has to give children in these coffee-growing communities access to education where they can learn all the skills and qualifications they want, then go onto their coffee farms or go into the city and get careers was such an eye-opener. I took that away as we are privileged in this country and we have to keep reminding ourselves of that. So whether you talk about, coffee-growing communities, education, or the local SEN school that needs a bit more help, I have to accept privilege on my part and be prepared and proud to give back.
I also love that you said you've got to deeply be passionate about it. It's not about ticking a box or anything of that sort. To get initiatives and charitable foundations like this to a very successful level, we've got to be very intentional. It's got to be meaningful, and especially if we're the drivers of that as well. I'm just thinking, and let me know your thoughts on this. So any organization who potentially is like, right, okay, Georgia, I've heard your podcast episode with David. I really need to get this on my agenda. How, as a people function, can we start to have those conversations with our senior stakeholders to get them to prioritize this?
It's about being intentional. Simple. And the two things I've always talked about is firstly team member engagement. So whether you have 2 staff or 20,000 staff like we do, it's the impact of engagement and retention is huge. Team member engagement, number one. The second bit is the extent at which consumers positively or negatively view as a brand. And often what we've learned is the sense of community or charity has a positive impact on that. So again, the simplistic view is whether we're talking to a marketing function, a supply chain function, or a chief exec, team member engagement, consumer sentiment. Keep it super simple, 2 driving factors.
I love it. David, I only have one last question for you. And the question is very much a reflection. So if we think back to being 28, you're going into your first corporate role. And the question is, looking back on your career, what is one piece of advice you would give your younger self?
So I'm going to give you two, actually, and it's one that I hold dear to me. So the first one is get comfortable with making mistakes. No one's perfect. We make mistakes all the time in our personal life, in our work life. And as a leader, I desperately try and encourage it across my team. It's how you learn. So don't aim for perfection, aim for progress. And I see that when I'm talking to my kids or a chief exec. Get comfortable with making mistakes. It's the best way to learn. Fail fast, move on, progress.
I don't think enough people talk about that in a serious way. Like, I think people say, we should fail fast and keep going. But I really got the authenticity. I know we were talking about this in when you were saying that, because there's so much power. And I actually think it makes us stronger as professionals to own our mistakes.
And my biggest learn from it was being vulnerable in talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
To share with my team when things go wrong and encourage them to do the same back to me. I think the power of the conversation is phenomenal. It's having the bravery to take a few risks.
Mm-hmm.
No, you won't always win. You always get it right. But God, you'll learn so much more than not taking that step in the first place.
What's the second?
So what I often talk to my team about, and I'm super passionate about this, is you do your best work in fourth gear. So what I observe across businesses and across industry is everybody wants to operate at 110 miles an hour and they think that's the right thing to do and they're proud of it. The reality is, at that pace, you're not focused on the right things, the things that make the biggest impact. So my encouragement to my teams is always, just take a breath, just come down a level and you'll see the world differently. That's when you do your best work.
I've never heard anyone say that before, and it makes so much sense. And I wish somebody had told me that during my career. That's incredibly powerful. David, honestly, thank you so much for today's conversation. It's been really refreshing, actually, to talk about community and sense of belonging and purpose and how powerful it can be with us being intentional and having that thread of authenticity. So thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Like this episode? Click here for more HR talk. And if you're just catching up, check out our previous episodes right here.